Okay, well, I can't help myself. I gotta respond to this shit. In general, I just can't help myself. So, first of all, this guy says Islam's not the problem, but it's kind of a misleading title. What he's really saying is that our reaction to it is the problem, but that Islam is actually bad. Now, he spends a lot of this video. Well, the first thing he does in the video, which is absolutely brilliant, and I love the story, and it makes me. I will cop it. I will reference it. I'll credit him, of course, or if it matters. But he talks a story where he's trying to help somebody solve a mosquito problem. After spending all summer building bat habitats so the bats can eat the mosquitoes, he looks out the back and realizes that this guy's got a whole quarter-mile full of tubs of standing water, these collected rainwater, because he's a hippie. And obviously that's the problem. That's where your mosquitoes are coming from. You got all the standing water, you're going to have a bunch of mosquito larvae. And trying to solve the problem by bringing more bats in is insane because you just need to pour out the fucking water, right? So that's great. I love that story. Brilliant. And something that you can use as a archetype of a kind of cognitive failure. Anyway, his Islam isn't the problem video comprises a response to two kinds of argumentation. One that says we need to seek out the moderates, and two that says we need to just condemn Islam wholeheartedly. Foremost, he says this stuff is a response to terrorism. The problem with Islam has nothing to do with terrorism. That's the number one mistake people make. I've had arguments with people trying to get them to listen to me explain to them that no, I don't oppose Islam because of terrorism. There's no higher incidence of Islamic terrorism in the West than there is of Western terrorism in the West. And the word itself is a highly politicized term that discursively does interesting things that aren't really very good. In other words, it's begging a lot of questions. When you call someone a terrorist, you're begging a lot of questions. You're not addressing the question of whether they have any legitimacy in their violence as a political act. Why is their violence less legitimate as a political act than the violence of some government, or blah, 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 blah. A whole shit tons of questions get opened up when you start arguing about terrorism. Terrorism is a stupid thing to use as a justification for anything, because Islam is not the source of terrorism. Terrorism is the source of terrorism, and regardless, it's stupid to try to argue that. The real reason why we ought not have immigration from Muslim countries, why we ought not invite Muslims to immigrate to the country, so the United States or Europe shouldn't invite Muslims to enter their countries, is because of the damage they do to the civil society. You see, it doesn't matter. I'll give this guy. He says at one point that there's nothing unique about Islam. It's just another aggressive ideology. Well, I'm going to have to make an exception there with that. Take exception with that a little bit, because of course it might be the case that it's just another aggressive ideology, except for the fact that it is the one massive global religion that actively supports violent conversion by violence in the status quo. You look at the history and you say, well, there's nothing remarkable about it. It doesn't matter. You say, why is it happening now? That also doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why it's happening now. I've had a lot of people come argue with me, well, but the West is responsible for the radicalization of the Islamic world. Okay, fine. I'll concede that if you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the fact that we still have a moral responsibility to ourselves, our own citizens, our friends and neighbors, especially the women amongst them, not to invite a misogynist culture to make a foothold in our neighborhoods. Not to allow people who don't believe in the primacy of freedom of conscience over their definition of sacred, who don't believe in freedom of expression, you know, as I've indicated in videos in the past, the vast majority of people living in Egypt were strongly in favor of the United States deporting a video maker to Egypt to be put to death for making a video they found offensive. This is a culture that is anathema to everything that rational people believe in, everything that good, decent people believe in, and it's as Islam is practiced throughout the Muslim world. This guy correctly points out that any notion that we should bring moderate Muslims to the table and somehow meow is fucking ridiculous. Of course it is. Of course it's ridiculous, because it's like saying, well, in order to make America more trans friendly, we should get some trans people to the table and talk to them about why America doesn't like them. Well, you know, that's assuming that people actually dislike transsexuals. I don't think that's the case, but let's just pretend it was. That's what it would be like. Why would you bring the moderate Muslims to the table when they are the part of the population that is both the tiny minority of the population and the part of the population that's looked down upon and held in contempt by the rest of the population? Why would you bring them in to help you solve the problem with the majority of the population that holds them in contempt? How are they going to influence anybody? So obviously that's dumb. Yeah, I agree with Homie here about that. On the second one, he says, well, and there's all these predictable reactions on the right, condemning Muslims, blah, blah, blah. I don't think my reactions are particularly predictable. I don't know if I don't position myself on any particular place like that either. I don't have a label in that fashion, but my reaction is that the public policy should be very simple. Close up the borders around Islamic nations that are engaged in conflict, sell them shit tons of guns and no boats or planes, and let them kill their way to democracy. Kill themselves their way to democracy, not other people. Should we feel bad because we fucked with the Middle East? Well, I didn't. I wasn't Eisenhower or whoever that was in post-World War II that fucked with the Middle East. That wasn't me. I don't feel bad about it. What I do feel bad about are half the population in every Muslim country is treated like chattel. How any progressive, quote unquote, can defend a culture that oppresses half the people, that commits apartheid against women, and say that somehow that's less significant than embracing diversity or something. You know, I dare you to go, liberal college woman who's so concerned with diversity, I dare you to go show your solidarity with the Egyptian men in the protests in Tahrir Square. They'll have another one soon enough, I'm sure. You see, what happens is if women walk around during a protest, they get gang raped. Because what are they doing out of the house? You know, what the fuck are they doing? Walking around by themselves? In public? I mean, especially if you don't have a sheet on. And here's something to remember also. Islam is obviously the Ku Klux Klan because they make chicks wear sheets. If they didn't make chicks wear sheets, then maybe they'd be okay, but since they do, that means they're the Ku Klux Klan and they hate black people. And racism is the worst thing ever, because race is totally real and really, really important. I joke, I jest. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.